Hello. So I'm going to start my first video by telling you about my journey through pregnancy. So just before I start, I will just tell you that I'm not a medical person, I'm not a scientist. Anything that I share with you is through my own experiences and my own journey and through extensive research online over many, many years, which has helped me on my journey to get pregnant. So I started trying to get pregnant when I was about 26 years old. I was very settled, I was married, and it felt like a good time for us to start trying for our first baby. We thought, like many people do, that it would happen very quickly for us. And, you know, when we decided to make the decision to start trying, I was already thinking about the ways I'd tell people and how exciting that would be, what my first baby shower would be like. So I was really planning all this out, and it was a huge disappointment, a huge disappointment. It didn't happen within the first month or so. I definitely expected it to happen almost instantly, and I think in a world where we can have anything that's, you know, almost a click away with things like Amazon and Netflix and online shopping, it's hard for us to take that we can't have something instantly. And for me, it was awful. It was so difficult. I remember, because I'm a secondary school teacher, being in the classroom quite a lot when I'd get my period and month after month of that happening, and it just felt devastating. So I understand what it's like to feel like it's just not happening. So we were just sporadically having sex. We weren't particularly making a schedule. We weren't following anything scientific. We weren't looking at ovulation. I later learned, many years later, how important that was to getting pregnant. So after the first few years sort of came to an end and there was no baby still, I started thinking, right, I am either gonna need to go and see a doctor, or I'm gonna need to have a look at why this isn't happening for me. So I spent quite a lot of time looking online, and I had sort of a penny drop moment when I saw and learnt about ovulation cycles. So I'm sure that if you're watching this, you've probably done your own research, but maybe you haven't, because it's not taught in schools. It's not actually something that's discussed very much. But ovulation is basically a certain time in your cycle where you release an egg that can be fertilized by the sperm, and that can then create an embryo, and that embryo can then create a baby. So when we learned this information, it was you know, really significant to us. So I started thinking, right, okay, maybe I'm not infertile, maybe I've just been timing this all wrong. So that's when we started using an online ovulation calendar, and there are so many of these online, and if you put in your period dates and your average cycle length, which mine's actually quite long, about 31 days, it will tell you roughly when you might be ovulating. So I used a couple of these and I got a rough idea of when I was ovulating, so when my egg was likely to be released and when I should be timing having sex, and hoping that a sperm would then reach that egg and fertilise it, and an embryo would then form. So I started using these calendars, and again, nothing happened. Devastatingly, my period would continue to come every single month. So it just seemed like, again, what's wrong with me? Why isn't this working? Do we need to go down the medical route? So I must have been probably 27 at this point, actually might be 26, and things just seemed, you know, really difficult. So I started then thinking, right, I'll try one more thing. I think I just saw an advert online for clear blue ovulation tests, or it was a pregnancy test, and I went to look in Boots, and I saw that actually you could use these strips and they would tell you exactly when you were ovulating. So that's what I started to do. I ordered a stash of these clear blue ovulation kits online, and these were the most basic things to use. So you'd literally get the stick, you'd wee on it and you pop it into a device that looks a bit like a pregnancy test. So then the stick would be read by the ovulation test, and after it's been weed on, obviously. So then you'd wait, I don't know, a couple of minutes, and it would give you a smiley face if you were ovulating, or an unhappy one if you weren't. And to my complete surprise, I tested a couple of days after my first period, and I was ovulating at that point. I think it was about 48 hours after my period had ended. So the online calendars were telling me that I was ovulating 10 days after my period, but these ovulation kits were telling me I was ovulating 2 to 3 days. So I was having sex at completely the wrong time. So there would never be any sperm to meet that egg because I was just having sex far too late. So then, I mean, I couldn't believe it, and neither could my partner. So we started to do research on this, and we started to realise, actually, unless you are having sex when you're ovulating, the chances of you getting pregnant are really quite slim. So unless you know exactly when you're ovulating, I think it's you've got a time span of about 24 hours to make sure that that's the best time to catch that egg that's come down that fallopian tube and hopefully greeted with lots of swimming sperm. Unless you give yourself that optimal chance, then maybe that's a reason why you or me are struggling to get pregnant. So for me, this had a huge effect on my outcome. So I think within a couple of months of doing it this way, after a couple of years of doing it just using online ovulation calendars, I fell pregnant. And the first couple of pregnancies that I had were chemical pregnancies. Now I'll talk about this in another video, but basically I tested really early, tested about 10 days early. You can get these super early kits to pregnancy tests, and they will tell you if you are pregnant 10 days early, 10 days before your missed period. And that there's a few problems with doing that because it's just a bit too early. So our first few were chemical pregnancies. As I said, I'll talk to you about that in another video. It's all a bit of a minefield, that one. But within the first 6 months, we were pregnant with our first child, who is a happy, healthy, now nearly 3-year-old. So after all those years of not knowing the science behind pregnancy, within months of having informed myself, is when I fell pregnant very quickly. When I wanted to try for my second child, who is now 4 months old, we got pregnant within the first month, just because of the use of ovulation kits and just timing it better, just knowing that my ovulation wasn't when these online calendars were telling me. So the first thing I would say is getting pregnant quickly is never guaranteed. But if you want to try and help yourself, then get some kind of ovulation testing kit and work out how to use them properly, and start testing the day after your period is finished, because you just need to know the exact time that you're pregnant, the exact time that you are ovulating, to give yourself the highest chances of falling pregnant. So hopefully this has been helpful, and in my next video we will talk about things like the first few weeks of pregnancy, and how I found that. So hopefully if you haven't got an ovulation kit, then you might go and get yourself one. The best one that I used was the clear blue one, as I said, just because they have smiley flashy faces and it's so simple to use. So good luck. If you are trying to get pregnant, you know, just keep at it. It's so hard not to get disheartened, but it will so likely happen. And I know lots of people say things like it will happen in time when you're least expecting it. That is the last thing you want to hear. I have been there myself. It's not helpful. What is helpful is getting yourself informed on the science behind pregnancy, because without knowing things like ovulation, without knowing that there needs to be an egg and sperm ready to create an embryo, you just can't get pregnant quickly. especially if you struggled like me. So good luck, and hopefully you might tune into my next video soon.